not work just because the way I use the all right, looks like it's working. All right, so let's see if this works. All right, so anyway, so continuing our topic, those of you who are watching on YouTube you're coming in a little bit late because for whatever reason it wasn't working when I was trying to do it over there. All right, so point number one, I have noticed this angle and this approach has become more common, that when people have something that you consider to be negative coming towards you, like a negative comment, or people just saying negative things to or about you, whether online or offline, or even things in your life. Let's say your business isn't going as well as you want it to, or your career is not going the way you wanted to, and maybe it's not happening the way you thought it would when you first started. This is also known as life happening. Again, I want all of you to understand that none of you is guaranteed to never have to deal with what we call life, meaning challenges, pushback, negativity, people disagreeing with you, people just not feeling whatever it is that you're doing, what you represent, or what you are saying. And people involved in this, when this happens, many of you, either you are telling yourself this or you are allowing people to tell you that this is somehow you're being victimized. You're being victimized by life. You're being victimized by the internet. You're being victimized by these random nameless, faceless people in your DMs or in your app replies. This is all nonsense. All right. You are not an innocent victim of life. All right. Well, actually, let me take that back. You have a choice as to whether you want to be an innocent victim of life or if you want to be the person who is playing offense. Do you want to play defense all your life where everything that happens, you're looking at it as some negative thing that life is coming at you? Or do you want to play offense in your life to where, yes, things may come at you, but you could do something back? It's like in a sport. There's offense and there's defense. When you're playing basketball, you're playing boxing, tennis, soccer, football, any sport, there's offense and there's defense. All right. The opponent can do something to you and you can do something to the opponent. Are you just the person who's just going to be back on your heels and taking the attacks from your opponent and never doing anything back and looking at yourself as a victim? Or do you want to look at yourself as someone who can actually go on the offensive? So yeah, you can try to hit me, but I'm also going to hit you back. Which one do you want to be? And this is just a simple choice that you get to make. And yes, it is a binary. There's no gray area in between us. And over here in our world, we like absolutes, not maybes. I talked about that last week. Absolutes means black and white, yes or no, done or not done. We're on this side of the line or you're on that side of the line, not this gray area that a lot of people like to create and have in their minds, because this gray area, what it does is it gives you the benefit of the doubt. It gives you leeway. It gives you free space and allows you to add time and space to situations, which essentially what it is using up the most valuable resource you have in life, which is your time. And the more gray area that you allow, the more gray you allow in your life, the more uncertainty, the fewer decisions that you get to make, the more indecisive you become, the less things you achieve, the less things you get done, the less pressure and stress you're putting on yourself, which is good pressure and good stress to put on yourself to achieve. And therefore, the less you accomplish. And then when you're dead, you have the regret, or I guess the people who survive you, they have the regret of all the things that you didn't do, simply because you're allowing the gray area. So that's why we like absolutes. We like black and whites over here in this space. So for example, there was this article I was reading in the New York Times, and I might do a whole series just on this alone. They were talking about the creator economy. So any of you who is a creator, or maybe you're thinking about getting into it, or maybe someone around you, spouse, boyfriend, girlfriend, child, etc., best friend, wants to get into the creator space, or they're in it. If any of you would like me to talk about this, just put it in the comments. You want to hear me talk about this at some time in the future. But there's an article the New York Times did where they were talking about the creator economy. This is like people who post on one of these apps that I'm listening to, that I'm streaming to right now. And they do it, or they want to do it as a full-time living, but for whatever reason, they're maybe not making as much money as they want to make right now, or they're making less money now than they used to 3 or 4 years ago, or they're looking at it and saying, well, I am making money and it's fine. However, I have to keep publishing and I have to keep posting in order to keep making money. And it's almost like the way this article was framed was that it's an exploitative relationship between, let's say, TikTok or Instagram or YouTube and the creators, because the creator has to keep publishing and publishing and publishing and publishing in order to keep making money. And there's never a point where you can stop, because if you stop, then the money stops coming in. And again, this was the framing of this article that they had in the New York Times. This is a couple of years ago, and I did a whole episode of my masterclass about this. So again, if you want to hear me talk about this, let me know and I will. And one of the things that I said to that article is, first of all, you can't be a victim of an exploitative industry if you don't volunteer and decide to get involved. All right, there are victims and there are volunteers. And if you find yourself being victimized by something that you chose to get involved in, you are a volunteer, not a victim. A victim is just somebody comes up and does something to you, unbeknownst to you, you had no hand in it, and just randomly occurred. So if you are sitting in your car in a parking spot and someone just runs into you in their car because they are texting and driving or drunk, or they don't know how to operate a vehicle, you are a victim of someone just smashing into your car. That doesn't mean that you are mentally a victim, but technically in a legal sense, you are a victim of someone else doing the wrong thing. Even if you're driving, someone runs into the back of your car at a red light because they weren't paying attention, you are a victim of that person hitting you. However, you can choose whether or not you want to mentally volunteer to be a victim mentally as for what happened. So if someone runs into the back of your car, yes, that sucks. Yes, you got to get your car fixed. Yes, it's inconvenient, but you don't have to mentally become a victim just because a thing that you didn't want to happen has happened. So when it comes to this situation, the one that I'm talking about here with these creators and this creator economy that were used for this New York Times article from a couple of years ago, you can't be a victim of the creator economy unless you sign up to join it. The creator economy cannot victimize you since you knew exactly what the deal was when you signed up. All right, it's very clear what the deal is. You want to be in a creator economy. And again, I might do a whole lot just on this subject alone. But if you want to be in a creator economy, you understand that you got to publish, you got to keep publishing, and the money comes as long as you keep putting material out. That's the way the situation is set up. That's the way social media is set up. If you want to build your business around social media, you got to stay in the game. And if you don't want to do that, get out the game. They're not going to pay you to be a creator because you're not creative. That's what it is. And it's more of a job than it is a business. And the major flaw of this article, there were probably like 10 major flaws of this article, but one that I'll point out right here, when it came to this New York Times, a creator economy conversation, was they were framing it as if the creators in the creator economy are entrepreneurs when they are not. You can't be an entrepreneur if you do not own the platform on which you are doing your thing. If you are a creator and your business is based on publishing on a social media platform, you are not an entrepreneur. You call yourself a contractor or a freelancer or an employee, but you're not an entrepreneur. When you're an entrepreneur, you are taking on the risk and you control the platform. You control the terrain. If you don't control the terrain, you're not an entrepreneur. Simple as that. And this article, again, was trying to frame it as if it was something that is not. And I don't know if this person who wrote the article, her name is Taylor Lorenz. Some of you may have heard of her. I don't know if she is just ignorant and doesn't know what she's talking about, or she does know, but she wanted to frame it this way just because it was advantageous for the point that she was trying to make. Either way, she was incorrect. Anyway, that's not even the topic that I'm talking about here today. The point is, I'm bringing up in this first one, is that when things that you don't want to happen are happening, you can choose to be a victim. You volunteer to be a victim, or you can choose to be a victor and push back against the situation in whatever way you want, even if it means you are simply pushing back mentally. All right. Sometimes you can't do anything physically about a situation, but you can always do something about a situation, even if it means just changing the way that you think about, look at, and respond to the circumstance that's in front of you. Everyone has that opportunity available to them. Okay. So anyone can choose to tell your story. And all of you who are listening to me right now, think about this. Any of you can choose to tell your story in any way that you want to tell it. How many of you have had any point in your life had something happen that you did not want to happen, that was not 100% your fault? All right. It wasn't 100% your fault, but it was something that you didn't want to happen, and it did happen, and it did affect you, and you had to figure it out somehow, some way. How many of you have ever had that happen? I would bet 100% of you, and most of you probably don't even have to think too hard about a circumstance like that. Maybe you were playing a sport and one of your teammates was just being negative and nasty to you. Maybe when you were in middle school, somebody was spreading nasty rumors about you. Maybe you had a parent who you didn't really get along with and you didn't like the way that they raised you growing up. Maybe somebody in your neighborhood was just a bad person and you didn't like running into them because they would just do stuff that you didn't like. Maybe at a job, you had a boss who was a complete jerk, or a coworker who was a complete jerk, or again, any of you could probably think of many things. Maybe you had some doctor or dentist who gave you a bad diagnosis and it messed you up for a long time. You had to kind of undo the nonsense that came out. All of you have had something that happened in your life that was not 100% of your doing, but it affected you and you had to deal with it. All right, everybody's had that. Question is, what did you do about that mentally? I'm not even asking what you did tangibly and physically. What did you do mentally about that situation? Did you say, damn, it's too bad that my situation is so terrible because my mom or dad was a terrible parent? Or damn, the doctor messed up. That messed me up. Or damn, this boss is a complete jerk. It ruined my entire career. So now I can't be successful professionally. You could do that. You could choose to be a victim, but understand victims are volunteers. This is what I want you to understand in my first point. Victims are volunteers. You have to volunteer to be a victim. And when I say victim, I mean in your mentality, not in what actually happened. Because again, if you have a jerk for a boss who ends up getting you fired from the job, you could be a victim of that boss being a bad person. I'm talking about mentally, how do you decide to frame it? How do you decide to tell that story in your own mind, let alone how you tell the story to somebody else? When I was playing sports in college, I had a coach, the last coach I played for in college. He was a new coach who didn't recruit me. He came in, he started cleaning house. I was one of the casualties of his house cleaning. I ended up not on the basketball team. It wasn't my fault that the coach who recruited me got fired. Maybe kind of it was, but I didn't make the decision to fire the old coach and bring in a new coach. So when he came in and decided to do what he wanted to do, I didn't tell him to do that. He decided to do that. So that situation messed me up and put me in a disadvantageous situation when it came to my basketball career. And if I was to tell that, that is exactly what happened. But at the same time, even though I was a victim of his decision making tangibly, I did not allow myself to be a victim in my mind as far as what I was going to do moving forward. I decided, let me reframe this situation. Instead of making it like this is some terrible thing that's going to destroy me and I'll never have a chance to make it, I decided to reframe it as, okay, you know what? This is actually a great, as they say, a setback is just a setup for a comeback. So I took that setback and reframed it as, okay, this is just a setup for when I become even more successful in the future. This part of the story is actually going to make me look like more of a superhero because it was a challenging situation. And again, that's a choice that all of you have. You can take any situation in your life that you didn't like, that you didn't want, that you did not cause, but it messed you up. And you could decide, you know what, let me reframe this as when I become even more successful in the future, this part of the story is actually going to make me look even better because I dealt with this and still became successful. And we all understand when you watch, let's say, a superhero movie or again, a movie, or it could be somebody's real life story. What are the stories that inspire us and impact us and motivate us the most? It's never the story of a person who shows up and says, well, you know what? I was born and everything was set up for me to be successful and everything I've ever tried has worked out. And here I am, a wildly successful person. All of you should be motivated and inspired by my story. All right. Nobody talks like that. Nobody wants to hear that person. That person never makes it to a stage or to write a book or in front of a screen because, first of all, nobody can relate to that because we all have faced setbacks. Secondly, if that person really did exist, we may respect and be impressed by what that person has accomplished and what they have. But at the same time, we can't be motivated and inspired by that because there's nothing in our stories that connects to their story. So next time you hear somebody talking about their life and let's say, just think about this, not even next time, just think about the last time you heard some known individual. So whether it's some influencer, it's a motivational speaker, someone who's wrote a book, somebody with a TV show, just a known individual, entertainer, whatever, athlete, talking about their story and how they got from where they were to where they are. One thing that you'll notice most of the time is the people who have the most inspirational stories are the people who dealt with the most negative stuff in order to become successful. And they became successful anyway. Those are the stories that really pop off, right? The person who was a drug addict, or the person who had abusive parents, or the person who overcame some terminal illness, but they're still alive, or the person who went to war and got their legs blown off and here they are, a motivational speaker, whatever it is. Usually is someone who has dealt with a lot of stuff. They were exposed to a lot of stuff that we would not want to be exposed to. They were exposed anyway, and they became successful anyway. Those are the stories that most motivate us. Is this true or not? I think we all can agree that it's very true. So you think of people whose stories inspire you is usually someone who fits that frame in some way, shape, or form. And when you look at your own life, you dealing with that is what can inspire others or maybe even inspire yourself. Again, the person who's just had a life of a yellow brick road is not interesting. We can't even relate to this person, even though we may admire the outcomes, but we can't relate to that person because none of our lives look like that. So the whole point of this first point is the more you get exposed to stuff that you don't want, the more you are, first of all, making yourself more mentally tough. Secondly, you can make yourself more tangibly tough to deal with whatever it is. So let's say you dealt with some physical pain. Okay, so now you're physically stronger because you dealt with the pain, or you dealt with some mental pain. That, again, as I said, mental toughness. You dealt with some financial pain that makes you more financially strong because now you went through that challenging situation, whatever it happens to be. So it makes you tougher, first of all, for having gone through it, and it gives you some cachet to now go to someone else who dealt with that same challenging situation and say, okay, look, yes, you're dealing with this challenging situation, but you can tell them, hey, put your big boy pants on, as they say. All right. So yes, you're dealing with a challenging situation. I dealt with that situation too. Now you need to get up, dust yourself off, stop crying like a baby, and let's go handle this situation. And you have the position to where you can say that to another person because you dealt with it yourself. Now, had you not dealt with it, then maybe you won't be able to say that to somebody. But being that you did, you could tell them, okay, what you're dealing with is nothing compared to what I've dealt with. Even if you don't say it in so many words, people are willing to listen to you because they know your background and know what you came from. But if you haven't gone through anything, well, what can you say to somebody else? You can't tell anybody anything about dealing with tough situations if you personally have not dealt with tough situations yourself. That's what gives you the cachet to tell somebody else, like, yo, cut the bullshit. Stop whining, stop crying, stop bitching, stop complaining, and let's deal with what we need to deal with. But you can't get that unless you yourself get exposed. So you have to be exposed in order to tell other people the exposure is actually a good thing, not the protection. Again, you go through your whole life being protected from everything. Well, what are you able to deal with? What can you deal with if you've been protected from anything that could possibly harm you? If you never dealt with anything that could possibly hurt, harm, or disturb you, what are you equipped to deal with? The answer is nothing. You are equipped to deal with nothing because you haven't dealt with anything. That's the whole point. All right, so let me move on to point number 2, because I could take all the time just talking about what I'm talking about here. But what we're talking about here today is why you need exposure rather than protection. Number 2, how I see it is that none of us wants to be exploited, attacked, used, disposed of, ridiculed. I don't think anybody wants that. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, well, I hope somebody ridicules me on social media today, or I hope somebody attacks me when I go to the grocery store this afternoon. I don't think anyone walks out of their house thinking that or aiming for that. But at the same time, we can all agree that these things happen. All right. I mean, hopefully it doesn't happen all the time, but we can agree that these things do happen. What I don't agree with is let's set up life to where this cannot possibly occur. All right. I don't agree with that. I don't agree with let's set things up so where it cannot possibly occur that anybody says anything negative to you on the internet. Let's set it up to where it cannot possibly occur that you will ever be upset, disappointed, sad, frustrated, angry, feeling left out, despondent, or any other negative energy. Like, we can't set life up to where nothing can possibly happen to you, because what happens is, and this is why I referenced that book earlier. Again, it's called The Coddling of the American Mind. Any of you who has not read the book, go look it up when I finish with this live. Thank you, Shorts. Who is that? Short Round. Thank you for those lightning bolts. Appreciate you. Over on TikTok. Go read this book. Again, it's called The Coddling of the American Mind. Here's what happens. Some of you may have heard this saying before. Hard times, challenging times make strong people. All right. The more hard stuff you go through, the stronger you get. Strong people make for a great society. And a great society, because it is so great and everything is so simple and easy, what that leads to is people getting weak. We become mentally weak. We lose our edge, and then it leads to a weak society. Weak societies bring on hard times, and those hard times start the cycle all over again. Because the times are hard, people have to be strong. Right now, in the world that we're living in today, the date that I'm recording this, we are in a society of weaklings. Our society right now is very weak. Our society is extremely weak right now because we went through a wave of good times. Times were very good for a long time because times were hard before that, and it created hard, strong people. So people like our parents' demographic. So let's say my parents are in their 60s. Like, those people, they went through challenging times and they worked hard and they were tough. So any of you as parents, or just people you know in your life who were in the 60 to 80-year-old range, those people were tough. They were strong. They were mentally tough. They were physically tough also. They knew how to deal with stuff. They dealt with stuff and they handled it and they survived. And they generally taught the people who came after them that same thing. they taught it to them. Doesn't mean we kept it, but they taught it to people in my range. So let's say if you're between the ages of 30 and 50, let's say 35, 55, 30 and 50, they taught it to us. Now, not everybody took the message with them. I did, but not everybody did. I know people in my generation who took those toughened messages that we got from our parents, and they said, oh, you know what? I'm going to teach that to the people I come across. So that's what I do. Now, if you ask people who are familiar with my message, what do you like most about Dre's message outside of the actual subjects and the topics? They say, like, this guy's no nonsense. He gets to the point, no sugarcoating. That's generally what people say about my message, regardless of the subject, whether I'm talking business, mindset, basketball back in the day, whatever. That's what people generally say to me and about me from what I've heard. And I took that from the generation that came before me, or 2 generations above me, such as my parents. They were tough mentally. They passed that message on and took it. But there are other people in my same bracket, my same generation, who didn't translate that message that way. They took that tough message that they got from our parents, and they said, well, you know what? I didn't like it. I didn't like being talked to like that. I didn't like the mental toughness part of it. You know what? I'm going to go kind of the opposite way, and I'm going to push against what the previous generation had done, which is often a natural thing. Usually, any of you, doesn't matter what age you are, the generation that comes after you usually pushes back on whatever your generation did. So if your generation was really mentally tough, the next generation is going to push back against that. Well, we ain't got to be like that. We're going to go the opposite direction. So this is just what people do. That when you're younger than other people, you tend to push back against whatever they're doing because you want to separate yourself and kind of establish your own identity, so you don't agree with or don't go along with what the previous generation did. And there are some areas in which I'm like that as well, but this area I'm not. I went along with it. The point being, we've created this coddled generation of people who want to never be exposed to anything that could possibly hurt, harm, or disturb you in any way, mentally and emotionally. I'm not even talking about physically, but mostly is mental and emotional. Again, that's why the book is called The Coddling of the American Mind. We're not talking about people getting beat up in the streets. And generally, if you live in the United States of America, we generally live in a safe world. Like, you're not worried about getting stabbed, as soon as you walk out of your door. But many people walk around mentally and emotionally frail, and you don't want anything to be said to or about you that could possibly disturb you. This is why on college campus these days, I don't know if any of you who has graduated from college in the last 5 to 10 years, can any of you tell me that the college that you went to, there was literally a place called a safe space on your campus? Has any of you had that happen? Or any of you experienced that? You went to a college where there was literally a place called a safe space. Now, I graduated college in 2004. So we didn't have any safe spaces on our campus. But from what I have seen and heard, that these places literally exist, that there are certain colleges where there is a place called a safe space, literally a safe space. And they have different ones for different people. So there might be a safe space for Black people, or they probably wouldn't even call it Black people. Maybe it'll be Black people. Maybe it'll be people of color. Like, if you're a person of color, you can go into this safe space, and only people of color can come here. And y'all can only talk about these things. So if you're not a person of color, you can't enter this space. You literally can't come in the room. Or they may have a safe space for females, and maybe they have a safe space for people who are they were born one orientation, they changed to another one. I can't use the word because TikTok will kick me off. So they have safe spaces for that. Any of you been to these places that have these type of things? And even if you don't, if nobody here who's listening to me can confirm, we can agree that these places do exist. From what I've seen, these places do exist. They literally have these safe spaces. And I talked about this probably about a month or two ago on one of these streams. There is no safe space in real life. There are no safe spaces. In real life, there is nowhere that you can physically go to where it is impossible for something that could possibly hurt, harm, disturb, frustrate, or disappoint you can't happen. That's impossible. There is no place in life where that occurs. Nowhere you can go. There's nowhere you can just block anybody who might disagree with you from saying anything to you. See, people create these little bubbles in their lives. The challenge with creating these bubbles in your life is that when that bubble bursts, because you have not been exposed to anything that could possibly disturb or disrupt you, you don't know how to deal with it when it actually happens. That's the problem with coddling people. That's the problem with coddling our children. If we don't let them get exposed to things, then when they're going to leave the nest, they're going to get exposed anyway. And if they didn't get that training or that conditioning when they were with mom and dad, when they go out into the real world, they won't know how to deal with it. And they're going to be worse off for it. That's why the exposure matters. You want to expose people early and often to things so that when it happens in real life, quote unquote, they're ready to handle it. For example, when I was playing sports in college, my coach would say to us one year, he said, my job, and this is the coach talking to the players, he said, my job is to make practice as difficult as possible for all of you players. And the reason why is because the more difficult practice is for y'all, when you get into the game, you'll be able to deal with whatever the other team does. And anything that you don't get exposed to in practice, if it happens in the game, you won't be ready to handle it. And then you're just going to get beat. And any of you who's played a sport, you understand. Coaches say all the time, how you practice is how you play, right? Why do they say that? Because they understand that if you practice and deal with everything that could possibly get in the way or frustrate you or slow you down or stop you from being successful, then when you get in the game, you're good because you already saw it. All right, that's the whole point. You want to be exposed to as many things as possible so that when you get in the game, you're good to go. Even those of you who have children, one of the things that said, and this is it continues to be a controversial thing, especially after that virus from a few years ago, that V word that I'm not going to say, that people take their kids to go get all those V words or all those shots. The challenge with this is one of the things that kids need is to be exposed to germs and be exposed to bacteria and be exposed to these things. Why? Because it helps build up the immune system. All right. And I'm not a doctor here. I think all of you understand that. The point is you want the kids to be exposed to stuff so that when they get exposed even more in the future, they already have the immune system built up. And I can use that metaphorically. You also use it literally. Any of you who has kids know the kids do all kinds of stuff that they probably shouldn't do. They go into a public bathroom and they're touching stuff. And I had my son at a restaurant this past weekend and he's touching the sink in the public bathroom. He's putting his hands on the floor. I'm like, don't put your hands on the floor. This place is disgusting. I don't touch anything when I go in the public bathroom. I do not put my physical hands on anything when I go in the public bathroom. But what does a 2-year-old kid know? They don't know. They put stuff in their mouth that they picked up off the ground. And what's happening? And you can't block them from doing it because they're going to do it. The whole point is that exposure is actually good because as they continue to get exposed to the germs and the bacteria, et cetera, what it's doing is building up their immune system. And yeah, they're going to get sick every now and then. That's part of the game. So you can't block a kid from getting sick. Everybody understand what I'm saying here? Any of you who has kids know what I'm talking about, or young kids, or actually if you have kids who are older, you remember that kids are going to get sick. Why? Because they haven't been exposed to that germ before and it kind of messed them up and they deal with it. And after you get over the sickness, the theory is theoretically, the point being, it's supposed to make your immune system stronger. So the next time you get exposed to that same bacteria, it doesn't make you sick again. Right? Isn't that the whole point? Now, let's metaphorically translate that over to other things that happen in life. See, if somebody did you wrong 5 years ago and they stabbed you in the back and basically did something they weren't supposed to do, yes, it was disappointing. Yes, it bothered you. Yes, it frustrated you. Yes, it angered you, whatever it did to you emotionally and mentally. Now, because you've dealt with it, the next time something like that comes around or smells like that, you know how to handle it because you dealt with it already. All right, that's the whole point. That's why the exposure matters. That's why you want to get exposed to things. So you want to get exposed to things voluntarily so that when that same thing happens involuntarily, i.e. randomly, you know how to handle it because you already dealt with it. You dealt with it on purpose. See, this is the reason why what makes people tough is the choice. And when I say tough, I mean mentally, physically, whatever way you want, is the choice to get themselves exposed to things before they occur, again, outside of choice. Like before someone randomly comes up to you and tries to do something to you, you deal with someone doing it and at least you know it's coming. So you're able to handle it. Like I was in a boxing ring this morning, sparring with this guy. When you get used to someone coming at you and throwing a bunch of punches in practice, then when it happens let's say you get in a real fight, all right, now you know how to deal with it because you dealt with it in practice. But if you never practiced it, then it happens in real life. What you going to do besides get beat up? All right, nothing. That's the whole point. So this is what mental toughness is all about. Okay, the moments that you hate being in are the ones that actually make you better capable and better equipped to deal with the stuff when it occurs because you can't block it from happening. Again, you can't live in a bubble. Any of you used to watch the Seinfeld show? Remember Seinfeld, the TV show? And George was one time he went to some house. I can't remember the whole story, but he was playing like a game of trivia against the Bubble Boy. Remember the Bubble Boy? So he was playing against this little boy who was in a bubble. I think he had some kind of disease, so he had to live in a bubble. It was a funny thing, any of you who watch Seinfeld. But the point is, none of you can live in a bubble. All right, there ain't no bubble for you to live in. There are no safe spaces. in real life. You cannot lock yourself in the house and avoid exposure, because when you avoid exposure, all you do is make yourself weaker. I'll give you one more example. So during that virus that happened a few years ago, whose name I can't say, and what happened is I have one sister, two parents. And I remember my sister, she went and got all the shots. My parents got all the shots. My sister got all the shots. I got none of the shots. So my sister goes and gets the shots. And then after she went and got all the shots, she went and she put into a group text that was between my parents and us. She said, well, I just found out that I have the virus again. And my dad said something like, oh, well, people keep talking about natural immunity. That's obviously some nonsense, because because she got the virus more than once. So she's like, my dad was like, well, since you had the virus before, I guess natural immunity is not a real thing. I didn't even say anything because I didn't even feel like getting into the conversation with people who have already made their minds up. But he was incorrect, because as soon as you take the shot, you're not natural anymore. You just took a foreign agent into your body. You can't be naturally immune to something because you didn't deal with it naturally. You dealt with it. You put a chemical in there. Of course, now you made yourself more susceptible to it. Again, different conversation that we're not going to have here today, but we will have that conversation. And some of you ready for that, some of you ain't. But the whole point is, if you want to make yourself more immune to anything that can happen, the biggest thing you need is not to block it or run away from it so you can avoid it. What you need to is actually expose yourself to it so you're more ready to deal with it. Again, I told you I didn't get any of the shots, but I'm pretty sure one time I did have the virus. I got the virus and it knocked me out for like one day. There was a whole day that I pretty much didn't do anything, stayed in bed, took some natural, things to do something to it, for lack of a better term. And next day I was back in business, back doing what I wanted to do. I exposed myself to it, took the punch, and then I dealt with it. And who knows if I've had it since, but I haven't been sick in that way ever since. I never get sick in that way. And I don't take any shots. I don't really mess with doctors or hospitals in a general sense at all. And I don't put any foreign agents in my body. I do not take medicines. I don't take anything over the counter whenever I have any type of ailment. Now, that's just me. I'm not telling you need to do it. This is not medical advice. But the whole point being is that the more I allow myself to be exposed, the more I am actually protected. The protection comes from exposure, not from avoidance. Everybody understand me? All right, third point. We're talking here today why you need exposure over protection. You cannot shield everyone from everything. Again, think about your children. Any of you who have kids under the age of 10, all right, they're going to have to deal with some of the stuff that you've dealt with. Now, of course, your goal, I would assume, as parents, is that you don't want your kids to have to go through everything tough that you've gone through. The whole point of parenting, or one of the points, is that we want to make the path easier for our kids than it was for us. All right? I think every parent wants that, regardless of how you choose to parent. The point is that they do have to get exposed to some things, and they need to learn to deal with them. Otherwise, they will be completely ineffective as adults. They got to get exposed to some stuff. So when my son is old enough to read and write and kind of hold the conversation, he's going to be working. I'm going to make him work. And not necessarily because he needs to go and earn money. And the first job he's going to have is going to be working for me. And I'm going to pay him, but he's going to work. And why am I going to make him work? So that he knows how to actually show up to work and do his job and be on time and be held accountable and be responsible for things. Because if he's going to be successful as a man, he needs to learn how to do those things. And I'm not going to be around to do it for him. I'm not going to do it for him. I'm not going to be around to coddle him. I'm not going to coddle him even now. He needs to deal with that. And he needs to deal with other kids who are his age, who are, maybe not so friendly. Maybe they're mean. Maybe they're not nice. Maybe they will want to snatch toys out of his hand. He needs to learn to deal with that, because it's going to happen. He's going to run into those people one time when I'm not around, and he needs to know what to do. I can't always be around to do it for him. And so again, exposure is the protection. Everybody understand? Avoidance is not protection. Avoidance just makes you more susceptible to the very thing you're trying to avoid. But the exposure actually makes you stronger to deal with it because you handle it. Okay? So the risks that you take on, even the risks that you take that you end up losing and failing, any of you ever took a risk and it ended up not working? I'm sure you got some risks that you took that worked. And those are the ones that you tout and you put on your bio, you put on your website, talk about yourself. But many of us, I would say all of us, have probably taken some risks that didn't work. All right, the risks that don't work, as long as you're allowed to tell the story, those make you stronger and tougher, as the saying goes. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger, right? We've all heard that before. Those that you beat builds your confidence. So we need both. In life, you need mental toughness. You also need confidence. You build mental toughness by coming up short and continuing to go. You build confidence when you win. Confidence comes from the wins. Mental toughness comes from dealing with the losses. Now, again, dealing with the losses, not letting the losses deal with you. Those are two different things. The losses dealing with you is when you try something, it doesn't work, and then you let it beat you down. That doesn't build mental toughness. That weakens you mentally, and that destroys your confidence. But when you deal with something that doesn't work, or you come up short, or if you want to call it failing, facing a setback, whatever you want to call it, and you keep going, that's where mental toughness gets built. You cannot build mental toughness not dealing with tough situations. Usually a tough situation is one that we don't have an answer for, or we try and come up short. You don't deal with that, you can't be mentally tough. So again, if you're trying to protect yourself or protect your friends or protect your kids from anything that could possibly be tough and challenging to them, you are actually making them weaker. Indirectly, you might think you're protecting them, but what you're actually doing is weakening them, because eventually you won't be around to protect them. Then what are they going to do? What are they going to do when you're not there to protect them? They're going to fail. They're going to get beat up by life because you didn't expose them to what could possibly happen to them, and therefore you made them weaker. You hurt them by not exposing them. So think of what's an example I can give you here? And I've already given you plenty of examples here, but the whole point is, before I give you an example, is that the exposure is the protection. So this is counterintuitive to what many of you have probably been taught, or have thought, or been taught, or you hear all the time. But that's the reason why I'm here. Because if I was just going to tell you stuff that you already thought about and you already had considered fully all the way through, then it wouldn't be any need for me to talk about this. What many people need when they face a tough challenge is not sympathy. They need someone to tell them to shut the hell up, stop bitching, and deal with it. That's what many people need. But what many people go looking for, especially in the world that we're in today, is a sympathetic ear. Oh, just tell me how, yes, it's terrible that situation is occurring and it's so bad. And yeah, that sucks that it's so hard and difficult for you, when what many people actually need, not want, but need, is someone to tell them, stop whining, stop complaining, and handle the situation that's in front of you. Why? Because that's what they're going to have to do anyway. That's what they're going to have to do anyway. I remember I saw this kid. I'll give you one last anecdote here, and I'll recap and take questions. If you got a question, put it in the comments right now. I was sitting on Brickell Avenue, and that's a street down here in Miami, and I saw this woman riding her bicycle on the sidewalk, and she had her little kid with her. The kid was probably 2 or 3 years old, and he's riding his little bicycle next to her. And they came up to a stop sign, and the mom stopped, and the kid was trying to stop. But when he stopped, it was a little bit awkward, and his bike fell. He fell off the bike. And again, he's on a little bike, so it's not like he fell that far. He wasn't injured or nothing, but he fell off the bike. And as soon as he fell to the ground, you could see on his face, and I'm just watching from across the street, you could see on his face that he was about to start crying. So as soon as he fell and realized what happened, I could see him processing it. And he starts to get that face like you see a kid when they're about to start crying. And he's about to start crying, and he looks up at the mom, and the mom wasn't reacting. She wasn't reacting at all. She was responding, but not reacting. Those are two different things. And she had picked up the bicycle, the kid's bicycle, without even getting off hers. She just lifted up the handlebar, and she had it sitting upright. And she looked at the kid, and I didn't hear what she said, but she basically told him, okay, get up and get back on the bike. She didn't overreact. And the kid, his face went from about to cry to just went back to normal. He got back on the bike, and then they just kept riding, and they rode right past me. And I still remember that story. This had to be about 8 years ago when this happened, but I still remember that story. The whole point being that when a boy fell off the bike, the mom didn't go, oh, I got to protect you from falling off the bike, because that's impossible. All right, you put a kid learns how to ride a bike, they're going to fall off the bike. All right, any of you ever taught a kid how to ride a bike? They fell. Any of you know how to ride a bike? Did you fall when you were practicing? You might not even remember, but I guarantee you fell off that bike. She couldn't block him from falling off the bike. She allowed him to be exposed to falling off the bike. And after he fell off, he started to react. When he saw that mom wasn't reacting, he calmed down. He got right back on the bike, and he kept riding. And that experience probably made him a better bike rider, because now he knows how to stop without falling off the damn bike. And rather than had his mom gone crazy and hysterical just because the kid fell off the bike, he probably would have been weaker, because then the next time he falls off the bike, he's going to do the same thing, start whining and crying and wait for somebody to come get him. The problem is eventually mom ain't going to be there. He's going to start whining and crying. Nobody's going to come to his rescue. And there he becomes a weakling, and life just has its way with him for the rest of his life, on a bike or off a bike. Everybody catch the metaphor that I just gave you there? Hopefully y'all got that. All right, with all that said, any of these topics you hear me talk about here on these lives, I could talk about these things for hours, but I'm going to spare you all because we all got other things to do. Let me recap these points. We're talking here today about why you need exposure, not protection. Again, I gave you several examples of this. And as I told you, we're in a society of weaklings right now. Right now, we are in the midst of a weak society. So the opportunity for all of you is to not be weak. All right. The opportunity is always in the opposites. Look around at what most people are doing. Do the opposite of that. Most people these days are mentally and emotionally fragile. They are weak. So your opportunity is to not be that. Okay. Read the book called The Coddling of the American Mind. Go look it up and get the book, audio, the physical book, digital, whatever you like. Get that book and read it. So anyway, I've noticed this angle coming from more and more people that are trying to block people from anything negative. Like, oh, WNBA players talking about negative social media commentary, as if you can stop that from happening. That's impossible. All right. People are going to be negative. There are negative people out there, and people can be negative. They're allowed to be. You don't need to protect yourself from it. You need to learn how to deal with it. Number two, nobody wants to be exploited, attacked, used, disposed of, ridiculed. Nobody wants that. But the point is, you can't block it from happening. So you need to expose yourself to it the same way that you let a kid expose themselves to bacteria and germs. Why? Because it makes the immune system stronger. The more you try to block it from happening, eventually you're going to run into it anyway. You cannot avoid it forever. You got to know how to handle it. Any of you doesn't know how to deal with a bully. Eventually, you can't block yourself from bullies. You can't be in a safe space in a bubble to avoid bullies. Because eventually you're going to run into a bully. If you don't know how to deal with them, they're going to deal with you. But the more you expose yourself now, the better you'll be ready for them if and when it happens. So again, it's better to be ready for something and not need to use it than to need something and not be prepared, as the saying goes. Better have it and not need it than need it and not have it. Number three, we can't shield everybody from everything. All right. Exposure to risk is your greatest strength. Exposure to risk is your greatest strength. The definition of an entrepreneur, for example, is a person who starts or runs a business venture while taking on greater than normal financial risk. Why is that the greatest strength? Because your greatest opportunity, your greatest income opportunity potential comes through entrepreneurship when you take on risk. You go somewhere where you're not taking on risk, then your potential is lowered. Why? Because there's no risk. All right. The higher the risk, the higher the potential. And that doesn't mean you're always going to win. It means sometimes you might fail. But again, that's what makes you stronger. But if you don't want to take on risks, then you also don't have much potential. All right. Your ceiling is low because your floor is low. All right. All that said, folks, if you got a question or comment, put it in the comment section. Work on Your Game University is where we do all of our work, in case any of you didn't know. Let's see if we got, and I'm just looking through the streams we're on. I got like 4 of them going over here because for whatever reason, YouTube wasn't working the right way earlier this morning. But let me see what we got on TikTok. Got a question or comment? Go ahead and post it. Work on Your Game University. The link is in my bio. Any of you who wants to work with me directly or get into our programs, all of our courses, trainings, etc. If you like this, we got a whole library of this stuff in our university, and I coach people directly on this stuff when it comes to your business, your mindset, your personal and professional development as an entrepreneur, professional, anywhere in between. So someone asks, am I a prime minister or president? If I was, you probably wouldn't know. You probably wouldn't know who I was if I was one of those. So the answer is no. I'm not made for politics. You got to lie to be good in politics, at least in America. So, and I was born in the United States. So I don't know if I'm even eligible to become that anywhere else. Gabe. Gabe says, I know that book. What book you talking about? Oh, Dre Philosophy. You got that book? Let's see. Good morning, Chocolate Diva. Good morning to you. Dan says, my wife's talking about you around the house and I'm sick of it. Yeah, I don't know if you're telling the truth there, but if you are, then great. Well, great that your wife likes it, but you should like it too. You should listen to the message. I think you'll like it. All right, let's see. I'm going through comments over on TikTok, by the way. So any of you who has something on TikTok, you got a question or comment, go ahead and post it. I'm addressing them right now. Short round with the #1 gifter badge. Thank you. I appreciate it. Somebody said, am I a pastor? Nope. Yaj D Music said, no safe spaces class in 99. No, they didn't come around till about 2015-ish, maybe sometime around there. Leadership Talk says, a team member or employee, I always choose someone with a few battle scars. That's right. It's because they can deal with it. That's right. Will says, you ever had to drop a Meet reveal for your job. I don't know what that means. I don't understand that question. I don't know if that's the way you meant to word it. I don't know what you mean by that question. You got a question or comment over on YouTube? I mean, not YouTube, Instagram. I am going through those right now. Let's see what we got. TikTok just gave me the hour long thing I need to fill in. Let me see what we got over here on TikTok. Brandon Joseph says uses pain and motivation. Yes, exactly. Pain is motivation. So that thing, again, depending on how you frame it, it can help you get better or it can make you worse. Just depends on how people choose to frame things. Crespo says, what's your input on ADHD, etc., put on meds, people walking around drugged? I'm not a fan of the medical industry in general. Just as a general rule, I'm not a fan of the medical industry because we know in the United States that the medical industries, they lobby the government to allow them to sell drugs. And this leads to doctors and nurses prescribing drugs and interventions to people even when you don't need them. You could solve your problem without drugs or interventions, but because the doctors, nurses, and hospitals are financially incentivized to prescribe things to you, operations or drugs, that they are more likely to do that even when they could help you solve your problem without it. Why? Because they're financially incentivized. That does not mean that every doctor or nurse or hospital who prescribes something to you is trying to hurt you, but it also means there is a strong conflict of interest. And human beings, by nature, respond to incentives. So when you incentivize hospitals to give people interventions, they are going to give interventions. So during that virus a few years ago, I don't know if all of you know this, but the more shots that were administered, the more money the hospitals made. They made money by giving more of the shots. That's fact. There's also fact that the more people they diagnosed with the virus, the more money that they made. So if you lost your life in a car accident during that year and they brought your body to the hospital, they would give you a test for that virus, even though you're already dead. And if you showed up positive for the virus, that got added as a stat. Then they would say, oh, here's an additional death from that virus. So those numbers that people threw out about how many people died from the virus, quote unquote, wasn't from the virus. You could, again, have been in a car accident. And if they tested your dead body and you tested positive for the virus, that would count as one of the deaths. That is absolute fact. And the institutions would get more money the more people that they caught having the virus. Again, that is all true. You can verify all of that on your own. So Crespo, to answer your question, I am generally not a fan of the medical industry, period. I am not a supporter of putting anyone on any type of medication. I don't care what it is. I'm not a supporter of medications, period. Over-the-counter medications, prescription medications, it is all a big scam. It does not mean that a medication cannot help you, but it's a scam because it is set up a conflict of interest that they make more money the more stuff they prescribe to you, which means they will sometimes prescribe you things that you don't need simply because they'll make money doing it. If I was in the industry, I would do the same thing. That's why I'm not in that industry. So it's a whole scam. Someone said, Brandon said you got Delta too. Oh, was that the other version of the virus? Yeah, I don't know what I got. Whatever it is, I got something. It was probably that virus. I don't know because I didn't take the test. So I don't know what it was. But it was probably that virus. Maybe it was just the flu. Who knows? Whatever it was one day and I was done. And I didn't take any medicines. I didn't take any shots. So that's what I do know. That's what I do know to be true. All right. So everybody, I do these lives Monday through Friday, 8:00 Eastern. So if you like this one, be here tomorrow. I'm going to do another one. Crespo says, my mother died of a heart attack in 2020. Paramedics kept asking me if she had the virus. Yeah, exactly. They probably, who knows, when you weren't around, they probably tested her body for the virus so they can add the stat. That's what they were doing. So that's the issue with the medical industry. I'm not, again, as I said, I'm not a fan of the medical industry. I have a whole masterclass I've done about why the industry is a scam. And one of the themes of it is what I just told you all, is that the conflict of interest is very, very strong. So you all got to be careful with this stuff. Whatever a doctor or person tells you. I'll give you one last story. I had a knee issue in like 2021 and my knee had swelled up. I was probably just working out and running too much and all that. So I went to a doctor, this well-known orthopedist here in Miami. He's like the team orthopedist for the Miami Heat. He's an independent doctor, not independent, but he works for the system, but he works outside of the team. And he told me after taking a look at my knee, he said, all right, what we're going to do is we're going to give you a shot. It was either cortisol or cortisone. I don't know the difference between the two, but whatever it was, give you a shot. It's going to stabilize your knee. That's what he said. It's going to either stabilize or destabilize. I can't remember which word he said. So it's going to stabilize your knee. And then after 8 weeks, I'm going to send you to my guy who's a physical therapist, and he'll help get your knee back in shape. And I said, stabilize my knee. What exactly does that mean, doctor? He said, what it means is we're going to put you in a cast or air cast and crutches. You're going to be on those for 8 weeks. And then after those 8 weeks, we're going to send you to a physical therapist who's going to help you get back in shape. Now, of course, physical therapists, they're going to get a kickback from that physical therapist. And all this is going to cost like thousands of dollars. And I said, this doesn't sound right. I didn't do it. I took what he said, and he said, "Yeah, let me know if you want to do it. We'll come back." All right, we paid him $450. Conversation was like 6 minutes. Then I called up my trainer, who was my trainer when I was playing, and told her what he said. And my trainer was a woman, and she said, "Yeah." She told me stories of how she had been through the medical system and how they scammed her and had her doing stuff for her back and all this. She said, "I'm not in Miami, Dre. I would help you if I was, but go talk to this other guy, this guy named Brian, who's my guy down here in Miami." I called Brian, tell him the situation with my knee, and told him what the doctor said. He said, "Well, come see me for an hour session, and let me see if I can help you out." And Brian, I go to Brian's house because this is during the whole virus thing. So I go to his house, and he gives me like 6 exercises to do. This whole thing took an hour. He gave me 6 exercises to do. He said, do these exercises every day for like the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then you should be able to run again. I did the exercises for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and I started running again. And that was 3.5 years ago. I haven't had a single issue with my knee since. I paid Brian $100, and it was like $100 or $150 for what he showed me, compared to the doctor who charged me $450 for the visit. I did an MRI. I did an X-ray. Those cost another. The whole thing probably cost like $2,000. MRI, X-ray, doctor visit. Then he was going to put a shot, a foreign agent in my knee, had me in a cast for 8 weeks, then go to a physical therapist. I did all the stuff that he said he was going to do to help me out. I did that with Brian 1 hour. And 4 weeks of doing exercises at home that required no equipment. It just furthered my skepticism of the medical industry. So I'm not a fan at all. All right. That's a side note that had nothing to do with the topic here today. But anyway, I'm giving you all that because I was asked. So Crespo, appreciate you. Thank you for asking that question. All right. So we got to wrap this up, folks. We are past time. We usually end these by 9 o'clock. So everybody have a great Monday out there. I'll see you all tomorrow. We are out of here. Work on your game.